Hey, it is 12 noon on Wednesday, which means it's time for this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Chrismo, and the show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. We've got a great episode for you guys today, a great one, especially if you're studying for the exam, but an even better one if you're assisting buyers and sellers selling properties, because what we're talking about today is prorations, understanding how these are calculated so you can get a better idea of how much cash a buyer may be getting at closing towards their closing costs, or maybe just some money they're going to put in their pocket if it's just extra money, or money that the seller may have to pay for some of these costs. So we're going to talk about prorations, why they're necessary, what we would prorate, some of the things we'd prorate at least, and then also how to do basic prorations, not just based on an entire year, but based on a month, because sometimes you'll need to do the proration on a year, sometimes just on a month. So a lot of calculations for you today. Excited to bring this to you. Stick with us. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
You are watching
Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Chrismo, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. And what we're talking about today is a topic that not only is something you'll need to know to pass your Florida real estate license exams, but also a topic that is something that comes up in every real estate transaction. And that topic is prorations. So a proration is where we're taking something that's billed out across a year, billed out across a month, and we're breaking it down to a daily rate. And now once we have that daily rate, we're then expanding that daily rate across the number of days it is that we need to calculate. So a few of the things it is that we might prorate, and one that you're going to see in pretty much any type of transaction is going to be property taxes. Unless our day of closing is on January 1st, that's really probably the only day out of the year where we don't need to do a proration, maybe December 31st, depending on how who's being covering the day of closing for this. But unless we're pretty much those 2 days, we should be doing a proration. Now, when we're in the month of December, the month of January, these may not be significant prorations that we're doing, but every penny counts. And when we find ourselves in the middle of the year, this starts adding up, or really all different points of the year for property taxes. So this is a proration that we're going to see in pretty much every transaction. Now, the question we get a lot from agents is, are you going to be responsible for calculating this in the real world? And the answer is no, you're not going to be responsible for doing these property tax proration calculations. Ultimately, for the actual transaction, when it's closing, that's done by the closing agent. They prepare the closing statement, and you're going to see these prorations in there. But now, when you have a seller that thinks they're getting this much money because they know that, okay, we're selling our house, this is the price we're selling it for, this is our mortgage payment, oh yeah, we have to pay commission too, but this is the money we should be getting. Not quite true. There's a lot of other expenses, and you want to understand what these expenses comprised of. And sometimes it's just as simple, hey, this is a recording fee. Hey, this is for the title insurance, and simple things like that. Maybe a little bit of an explanation behind them. But now property taxes, how do they come up with that number? What is it that's done with this? So again, this might not be something you're doing in your day-to-day basis, at least to close a transaction. That's usually your closing agent that's going to handle this for you. But you'll want to be able to explain this to them. And now where you will have to do these calculations, and yes, there are calculators that you could use online that help walk you through this, but where you will see this calculation, where you'll want to know how to do this, is when you're trying to estimate the seller's net proceeds. Because that's ultimately the bottom line that sellers are most concerned with when they're selling their property. Not how much necessarily they could sell it for. Unless they own it free and clear, that number that they're selling it for starts to become a little irrelevant. The reason why, and you might think that's the most important number in the world, but the reason why that might be irrelevant is because that number that it's being sold for doesn't represent how much money that's going in their pocket. And it's definitely a disappointment when they see that they're selling their house for $300,000, yet they're walking away with $20,000 or $25,000. which that absolutely could happen. It depends on how much equity it is they have in the property and how much expenses it is are going to eat away and chip away at that equity. So when we're figuring property taxes, it's important to understand this calculation so that way if you're using these automated ones online, you have at least a general idea of, okay, that seems like that's an accurate calculation. But it's actually really easy to do. You don't even need to use these calculators just to get a basic ballpark idea of what the proration may be for property taxes. But first, you have to wrap your head around what we're doing with a proration. And essentially what we're doing with the proration, so first and foremost, we have this charge, this property tax charge that spans a year. So let's say we've got January 1st over here, and let's say we've got December 31st over here. So we've got January to December, that's a normal tax year, just a regular calendar year as a tax year. And you're going to have a bill, or the seller will at least have a bill for what the taxes are going to be for this year. And let's say that this bill is, let's say, $1,200. Now you can already see, without doing any sort of this math or anything like that, if it's $1,200 for a year, you have the idea, okay, that's about $100 a month, right? 100 times 12 is $1,200. So our tax bill essentially is about $100 a month. And that $100 a month, if we're, say, closing sometimes in June, maybe we're looking about like $500-600 of what our proration is. And that's just the rough math. And the better it is that you understand this, the quicker you can come up with something like that. But what I was just doing there basically is called the 360-day method. And the 360-day method, it's quick. Because we're like, okay, $1,200, 12 months, that's $100 a month. And now we could break it down for days for that particular month if we're looking for something more specific. But really the 360-day method is meant to be quick, to be easy, to be mental math, that you don't have to draw anything out or anything like that out. You just punch in whatever this is, divided by 12, okay, that's about what a month's worth, and give or take, okay, we're about halfway through the month, so the month that we're closing, that's maybe about $50 rather than $100. That's our 360-day method. But now for your exams, and also if you're looking for the exact right number, you don't necessarily want to use the 360-day method because there's not 360 days in a year, it's 365. So we've got an extra 5 days we're leaving out with the 360-day method. And what happens is if we assume all months have 30 days in them, which is what you're doing basically, assuming all months are equal with the 360-day method, 30 times 12 is 360. So you leave out 5 days a year, which it's quick. You're going to be pretty close to what the number is, but when we're looking for the exact right number, whether this is on our exam or you're trying to find the exact right number in the real world for what the property tax proration will be in this situation, we'll use the 365-day method. And the 365-day method is designed to be specific. It's designed to be exact. It's designed to get you exactly the dollar amount of what that may be. So $1,200, that's our taxes for the year. Let's say our closing date is, let's pick, that roughly middle of the year. Let's say June 1st. So June 1st would be our day of closing. Now, in the question, or in the real world, you'll want to know who's paying for that day of closing. That's why when I draw this in on this number line here, I don't just draw this as a line, because June 1st is a day. And when we've broken this out to our daily rate, this will represent a few dollars of property taxes. And now we need to know whether that few dollars is going to fall on, this is the seller side over here, because this is when the seller owns the property. And then over on this side here is where the buyer owns the property. So we need to find out whether this day is going to be on the seller side or the buyer side. Now typically how this goes down, it is specified in the contract, but normally this day of closing is credited or charged, or whatever type of proration it is that they're doing. Usually the day of closing is falling on our buyer's side. And that's what you want to look for in the question, if you're doing this on your exam, is who gets that day of closing. And if this is going to the buyer, it means the buyer gets that day of closing. So 6-1 belongs to the buyer. So for the seller days, we're only counting all the way up until May 31st. So up until May 31st for those seller days. Now, ultimately, what we have to do to understand this proration and who's going to get paid what is we first have to understand when these property taxes will have to be paid. So these taxes become payable on November 1st. November 1st is when they become payable, so over here is where the taxes are going to be paid. At this point, the seller's long gone. The taxing authority is not going to split up the bill and say, okay, seller, this is how long you lived in here, so this is your bill, and buyer, this is how long you lived in here, so this is your bill. No. The taxing authority just makes one bill, and then whoever owns the property in this time is responsible for paying that tax bill. So it's going to be the buyer's obligation not just to pay for their share of the time they own the property, but the whole thing. The buyer has to pay for this whole year's worth of taxes, which if the seller lived there for basically 5 months, that's quite not fair. That's really not fair for the seller to get away with not having to pay their fair share of the property taxes, because the buyer's going to get stuck with that whole bill. So that's why we do prorations, to help make it fair, to have a fair and even breakup. Okay, this is how long you lived in the property, therefore this is your portion of the taxes, and this is calculated at closing. So this is something that does eat away at what the seller's net is going to be, what the money the seller is able to walk away with. And now in this situation here, it's only $1,200, but $1,200 is not a lot of property taxes. On a $300,000 home, you might be looking at $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in property taxes, depending on which county and city and so on and forth that you live in. So we might not be just talking about, say, $600. It's going to be a little bit less than $600 in this question, probably around $500. That's just using my rough estimations that we've got going on here. So that 360-day method is good for estimating. But let's say we've got $7,000 in property taxes. Now we're looking at maybe about $3,200, $3,300 for this situation, which that's a lot of money that the seller's going to be having to put out of their pocket. That's going to turn $342,000 into $339,000, dropping us below that $340,000. And that's when a seller sees that money, they're like, wait, where did all my money go? I thought I sold my house for this. How did the buyer cheat me? What happened here? So you want to understand how to do this calculation, so that way you could fully inform your buyer and seller, hey, seller, this is about how much is going to be, that you're going to be deducted from your net proceeds. It's not money they have to pay unless they don't have enough equity in their property. Then they're going to have to pay this out of pocket, which then it becomes even more important to know this, because now we got to talk to the seller and say, okay, look, let's figure out how much you're going to need to pay out of pocket to sell this property. And that's if they don't have really any equity in the property to not cover their closing costs and expenses. But anytime it's eating away at their money, they're going to want to know. And the buyer, in order for them to understand the money that is they're going to have to come to the table with, you want to have an understanding. And you don't have to be specific up front where you're first starting to look for a property, but when you're qualifying them and getting an understanding of how much cash they're looking to put towards the property, you don't want to have a deal fall apart because they're short a couple $1,000s to pay for their closing cost. And the deal probably won't fall apart, but you don't want the headaches of pulling your hair out of trying to get them to help borrow some from some relative to pay for this, and then it's all kinds of other documentation that's needed. So the best thing to do is to understand this up front of, okay, roughly for this price home, we're going to be looking, about this much that you're going to have to pay in a property tax that you're going to receive in a property tax proration, but that's still not going to offset all these other expenses, including the down payment they have there. So that helps the buyer get an understanding of, okay, this is cash I could count on coming in when I'm selling the property. But let's get actually into the math of solving this one here. So what we're doing essentially is taking this tax bill, which is the bill for the entire year, and the first thing we're going to be doing is taking this bill and breaking it up across 365 days. Now, if this is a leap year, you'll have to adjust that accordingly. But if it's not a leap year like most years, you're just going to divide that out by 365 days. So we would just punch that in our calculator, 1,200 divided by 365. And we end up with, and you won't want to round here. You won't want to round because that'll affect our total number. You want to leave this, I mean, you'll see this long number that we got in our calculator just by calculating that out. You don't want to round that number. You want to leave that number in your calculator. So we've got equals 3.28767, 2, and 3. And who knows, there's maybe even more digits that our calculator's hiding on us there. So this is our daily rate of taxes. This is basically how much every day is worth in property taxes. Like I said earlier, it's a few dollars. And then that day of closing, yeah, it's just the difference of $3 and some change, but ultimately we want to be exactly specific, and your closing agent does need to be exactly specific to who gets that money, and it will specify in the contract who that day of closing belongs to. But especially on your real estate exam, you want to make sure you don't forget about that $3 and about 29 cents or so. So now once we've got that daily rate figured out, and usually I advise to do this second, but since we already had the property taxes up there, just in nice and easy so you understand the daily rate. But when we do some of these rent prorations, I'll talk to you why you want to count the days first. So now what we need to do basically is we're finding out the seller's time that they lived in the property, this seller's time, and how much it is that they have to pay for this time to the buyer, so the buyer can pay the tax bill. Now, what the buyer should be doing is they should be taking the money that they would have had to spend that they're being credited for at closing and set that aside so that way they've got the money for when they do need to pay the taxes. But let's be real here. They're going to count that money towards that, and then they're going to worry about saving up the money for the tax bill. But either way, it's money that's coming in that should be coming in. Without this proration, they wouldn't be receiving any money at all. So we're counting the days up until June 1st. And in January, we've got 31 days. In February, and again in a non-leap year, we've got 28 days. In March, we've got 31 days. In April, we've got 30 days. And then we're going to count the full 31 days in May. So ultimately, we do need to do another calculation here of 31. And this is where you want to be careful adding these together, because these simple computations like this are very likely to make you some sort of mistake just punching in your calculator quickly. So we're just going to do 31 plus 28 plus 31 plus 30 plus 31, and we end up with 151 days. So the seller owned the property for 151 days. That was the seller's time in the property. The remainder of the year, that's the time the buyer was in the property. But look, we don't care about how long the buyer is in the property, because the buyer is going to have to pay the entire tax bill. They're paying the whole thing. We're just finding out how much money the seller's giving to the buyer, that they're paying to the buyer for their fair share, the 151 days out of the year that they lived in the property. And that's what we're calculating. The reason why we're calculating this is because this is how it's going to be affected on the closing statement. The closing statement is going to have what's called a debit for the seller, because the seller is going to have to pay whatever 151 days worth of the share is. We're going to calculate that in the next second here. And the buyer is going to receive a credit. They're going to be receiving this money. And again, that's what's happening ultimately here. The money's transferring from the seller to the buyer. And on the closing statement, the dollar amount's going to show a debit for whatever this portion is, and then it's going to show up on the buyer's side as a credit that they're receiving this money. And so now to figure out what exactly our proration is, what that prorated amount is. Again, I'll punch this in our calculator so we don't have to type that all again. 1,200 divided by 365. That gives us our 3.28 whatever per day. Again, we don't want to round this here, because rounding this to 29 cents, yeah, this fraction of a cent doesn't matter for just one, but when we multiply that out 151 times, we're talking about the difference in some change. So the proper way to do this is save the rounding until the very end. So we've got our 3.28 whatever that's in there, and then we're just going to go ahead and take that and multiply it by 151 days, because that's our daily rate, and this is per day. And what I tell you, we're going to be close to 500, but that shows you how the 360-day method of estimating can be flawed. You're going to be pretty close like this, so that's helpful in the real world, and you really have to understand the 365-day method to be able to use the 360-day method. The 360-day method of just estimating your head based on, okay, 5 months out of the year, if every month is $100, about $500 for 5 months. We're close, we're close. And our seller probably isn't going to get upset by the $3 and some change that we're leaving out there. But, you know, it's maybe they will be. Yeah, people get petty about things like that sometimes. So again, all we did was we took that daily rate, we multiplied it by the 151 days, and at this point we could round, we get 496 and 44 cents. And that's our proration. That's how much is going to be debited to the seller, how much the seller would have to pay out of pocket, and then credited to the buyer that the buyer would be receiving on their closing statement. Not a whole lot, but I mean, with $1,200 in property taxes, at least in the Tampa, Hillsborough area, that's not a very expensive property, so that's a pretty good chunk of change in comparison to the price of the property. When we come back, we're going to do some more prorations. We're actually going to do another property tax one since this one is so common, and this is going to be one where it's maybe not quite as easy to just estimate it, but I'll show you how we could estimate it, and we'll see how close we come with our 365-day method. But we're going to take a quick commercial break first. Stick with us. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com. Does your current career allow for unlimited income potential? With a career in real estate, the sky is the limit. What you put in is what you get out. Find out more about how you can tap into the unlimited income potential of a career in real estate at tampaschool.com.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.
You are watching
Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time, we come to you live to help you understand the technical side of the real estate industry, which is what we're doing today with property taxes. I mean, if you're just tuning in, you probably see everything that's going on here on this board and you're like, wow, maybe this is too technical. But look, we're going to run through this one more time here, and it's really not that difficult. Once you are able to do this, you'll be able to recreate these steps in your head. You won't even have to draw out everything I have up top here. That's more just for explanation purposes, so you can wrap your mind around what it is that we're doing. Once you understand this, really, this is all you're doing right down here, just these couple little pieces of math. So it's actually pretty easy. But yeah, let's now go ahead and pick a value, because you know, I told you, you know, this is money that the buyer's getting, and $500 on a $100,000 home, or however much the home cost. They're like, oh, big deal, $500. I could take the $500 hit. But now let's talk about with a property that's got a little bit higher property taxes, where it's a little bit more of a deal. I mean, $500 is still decent amount of money, and especially in respect to the price of a home that has $1,200 in property taxes, that's a pretty good chunk of change. But let's say that our tax bill is $7,000. $7,000, and now we're going to have a little bit more money it is that we're working with here. Let's say our day of closing is, let's say, October 15th. So October 15th is our day of closing, and we'll say that's of 2018, just so there's no confusion there. I know the month, day is kind of weird looking. And let's say the day of closing goes to the buyer. So we got a $7,000 property tax bill. We've got our day of closing on October 15th, 2018, and we've got our day of closing being charged, or being credited really in this case, to the buyer. So again, just to help you get a better understanding with this, we'll put out our number line here of our year. So we've got January 1st here, December 31st here. Now our day of closing in this case is a lot closer to the end of the year. October 15th. And remember, taxes can't be paid until November, so this is where taxes are going to have to be paid, and this is where the buyer owns the property, and then this is where the seller owns the property. So now we've got not only do we have a significantly higher tax bill, we actually have a significantly larger portion of time that the seller is living in the property. So first thing we're going to do is figure out our number of days here. So we've got 31 days in January, 28 days in February, 31 days in March. Let's see here. Gotta go smaller. I'll write this a little bit smaller because I'm going to run out of room here. So 31 days in January, 28 days in February, 31 days in March, 30 days in April, 31 days in May. Then we've got June with 30 days, July with 31 days, 30 days in August, and then 31 in September. And then we also have another, so when we're counting this out, remember our day of closing is going to the buyer in this case. So this day of closing is going to end up being on the buyer's side. So we're going to count 14 days in October. Let's go ahead and move our day of closing there to make this look a little bit more sensical. Again, the drawing, this is just here to help you understand this. This isn't something that you need to do every time you solve this once you understand how to calculate this out. So we've got 30 days here in, what was that, August, and then 31 in September, and then we're counting 14 for October because that was our day of closing here on October 15th. Now, the reason why we're only counting 14 days in October, not that 15th day, again, is that day of closing goes on the buyer's side. So that's going to be the buyer's day that they're responsible for paying the property taxes. And then we're going to go ahead and figure out our number of days. But before we do that, let's make our estimation. And now these estimations, not only are they helpful for the real world, but this does make this a little bit easier on the exam for you to check to make sure that your answer is somewhat correct. So using the 365-day method, and we're going to use a very crude version of the 360-day method, we're just going to take that $7,000, we're going to divide that by 12, and that gives us about $583 a month. And we've got about 9.5 months that we're dealing with here. And that's all I'm going to do here. Just multiply this by 9.5 just so we can get an estimation. So times 9.5, and we end up with about $5,500. So about $5,500 is where our number should be, give or take some. Now we're going to come through and do this specifically, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be $5,541, but around $5,500 is about where this is. And that might be enough for you just when you're talking to your client, coming up with some rough figures. Hey, figure about $5,500 or so you're going to have to pay for property tax proration based on your current taxes. And you see how easy that is. You don't have to number out all the days of the months like this. You could literally just take, okay, we're about 10 months here, and when you're initially talking to the seller about this, we maybe don't have a day of closing in mind yet. So we say, okay, well, if we closed in the middle of October, that would be 9.5 months that you would live in the property. So, you know, based on this, we divide this by 12, multiply by 9.5, about $5,500. That's not an exact number. I could give you the exact number if you want, but let's figure about getting an exact closing day before we start trying to make this number exact. So that's helpful in the real world, and that's probably as deep as you'll have to get into this in the real world. But on your exam, you want to come up with the exact numbers. And if you do want the exact number, if you have the client that says, well, I want to know exactly how much money I should be getting off of this, okay, now we could do this calculation using the 365-day method, which just takes a little bit longer, just slightly more time. So first thing we're going to do is figure out how many days the seller lived in the property. So we'll just go back into our calculator here. We've got 31 days plus 28 days plus 31 days. And be very careful with this here. You're likely to mix these up and hit a wrong number on your calculator, forget a month. So plus 31 days plus 30 days plus 31 days plus 30 days Oh, no. Okay, so we got these numbered out wrong here. 31 days for August, 30 days for September. So you see, it's easy to make a mistake like that. Really, I don't think that affected here because we both ended up being the same amount. But two ways you can remember how many days are in every single month so you don't make mistakes like that. There's a rhyme. 30 days have September, April, June, November. So if you remember that 30 days have September, April, June, November. I used to hate that rhyme because I'm like, how am I going to remember those random days? But it just kind of has got a little bit of a ring to it. 30 days have September, April, June, November. Sounds almost like some sort of rap song. Not really. But it'll help you remember those 30-day months. Or you could also use the knuckle trick. I learned it with one knuckle, but you could also do two knuckles like this. But I like one knuckle because then you could just go across with this with your finger. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. Now when you get to the end, see how I did July, August? And that's the mistake I made here. I was alternating. July and August are actually back-to-back within 31 days. So you go July, August, September, October, November, December. And that helps you remember. When you're on your knuckles, that's 31 days. When you're between your knuckles, that's 30 days. So whichever method you prefer to remember how many days are in the month, you'll definitely need to know that if you want to do prorations. And you don't have a calculator handy in front, or a calendar handy in front of you to look at the particular months. So let's go ahead and recalculate these again because I have no idea where we left off. So 31 plus 28 plus 31 plus 30 plus 31 plus 30 plus 31 plus 31 plus 30 plus 14. 287 days. 287 days. Now, like I said, you're very likely to make a computational error punching these into your calculator with that, so my advice is to always double check that. If any of you guys are watching here and you end up with a number with other than 287 days, I probably had fat fingers and hit the wrong number on my calculator. But let's assume it's 287 days. That sounds about right. There's 365 days in a year, so 287. We're almost to the end. That's October is almost to the end, so seems legit. Don't be that assumptive on your exam, though. Always double check that just to make sure. Because like I said, I've made a lot of mistakes with this. This is the portion of this calculation where you're most likely to make mistakes because these are just menial numbers that shouldn't have to mean anything. But anyways, we've got 287 days. Now we need to figure out our daily rate. So in order to do that, we're going to take our $7,000 in our annual tax bill, and we're going to divide this by 365 days since we're dealing with a non-leap year here. So we take 7,000, we divide it out by 365 days, and we end up with 19.178082 plus whatever number the calculator is hiding from us. And if we flip it sideways, yeah, you'll see it's even longer numbers, so there's even more numbers they're hiding from us, and that's why you don't want to round this off here. And that almost rounds up to 18 cents. But if we do that here, that extra 0.2 of a cent, let's see what 0.2 of a cent, so that's 0.002, 0.002, see how it's easy to make the fat finger mistake, times 287 days, not a whole lot, but about a 57-cent difference by rounding here rather than saving your rounding for the end. So that absolutely does make a difference on the exam. There probably won't be another answer choice that's off by 57 cents, but when you don't get the number exactly right on the head, you're wondering what it is that you did wrong. Why did you not get the number exactly? Whereas when you do get the number exactly, that's a little bit of a confidence boost. Like, oh yeah, I got the answer right. So we're not going to round that there. We're going to leave that in our calculator. So I got to go back and put that in. So we've got that full number in here. Just again, 7,000 divided by 365. And we get 19.17 blah, 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 blah. Now we're going to take this number and multiply it by 287. So we take that, just hit times 287. And now, ooh, we were really close. $5,504. So that 360-day method, it's not too shabby. And really, that's, if you could do that in the real world, you'll be able to get through. I mean, and always say that, hey, you know, it's going to be about $5,500. And then if it's $54.96 and it's $4 difference or $10 difference on $10 difference on $5,500, very small fraction of the $5,500. So, and then when you say it's about, they'll know there's a little bit of a margin of error. So that 360-day method is accurate, and that's easy to do without having to do all this menial calculations where it's easy to make a mistake with. But that is our proration, $5,504. That's a pretty good chunk of change. Yeah, now we obviously are buying a property that's in a very high tax area for property taxes, or it's a more expensive property because property taxes are determined based on the value of your home. There's the value of your home times whatever millage rates there are, which you're basically just finding a small percentage of the value, and that comes out to be, let's say, $7,000. Now we're talking about a big chunk of change. $5,000, that's money that you probably don't blink an eye at too much. Especially when you're a buyer and you tell the buyer, hey, look, you should get about $5,500 coming towards you from the property tax proration. And that's good because that helps them save some of their cash so that way they are able to pay that full property tax bill when it comes due. So this proration, it's really essential to at least understand when these apply and where they apply. You're going to have almost every transaction is going to have some proration. It could be $500 like we did in that first one, or it could be $5,500 like we just came up with in this one here. And you just got to, again, even just doing that 360-day method, I can't remember the exact number. Let's figure out that exact number again and see what we came up with here, because that 360-day method does usually get you within a few dollars here. So again, we had $7,000. And what we did for the 360-day method is we just divided this by 9.5 months, since that's about the time it is that we're going to be living in there, divided by 9.5, or no, 7,000 divided by 12 months. So we figure out our monthly rate of $583 times 9.5. And yeah, $5,541. So we were off by about $35. Yeah, you can see how that is a little bit of a difference. I mean, that's buy lunch, maybe a couple lunches if you're going to a place like Chipotle or something like that. But yeah, that's our proration. We came pretty close with the $5,541, but again, if you want to be exact, that's where you break out the 365-day method. You break out your calculator, make sure you're typing those in exactly. Find your number of days, which is 287. Find your daily rate, which in this case was about 19 and about 18 cents. But remember, we don't round here because the goal of it, when you want a quick estimation, that's where you do the 360-day method, where you divide this by 12, multiply it by 9.5 months. There you go. You've got your rough answer. But when you want a precise answer, that's where you break out the 365-day method. You count the days to the day. You leave every decimal in here for your daily rate, then you multiply it by your number of days, and then at that point you could use your rounding rules to round appropriately. But that's our proration using the 365-day method as well as the 360-day method on property taxes. Now, I still want to talk about a rental proration, because a rental proration is very similar to property tax prorations, but our differences are the seller already has money for the month and we are trying to get money for the buyer for when they own the property. So what happens in a rental proration is where the landlord basically already has the rent and there's a new landlord coming in buying the property, and we need to prorate that rent out. Now this you obviously only come across when you're dealing with an investment property, an income producing property where there's a tenant there. But if you do come across that, you do want to know how to do those calculations. And if you could do this, you could do the rental calculation. And we're going to cover that after this quick commercial break, so stick with us. I'm John Christmo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com. Does your current career allow for unlimited income potential? With a career in real estate, the sky is the limit. What you put in is what you get out. Find out more about how you can tap into the unlimited income potential of a career in real estate at tampaschool.com.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.
You are watching
Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Chrismo, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. If you're interested in starting or enhancing your real estate career, make sure you give us a call. The phone number is right below, 813-928-0106. You can also text us at that number. You can go on our website and chat with us. That website is tampaschool.com. And also be sure to check out our Success Center. This is where we help you plan for your success in the real estate industry, because your success is our greatest reward. Literally, your success helps us grow our business. Because if you're not successful, if you go take a pre-licensing class with us, that's great, but we're not the one and done, one stop, you're over with us. We're there to help you over the life of your real estate career, because we want you to get your license, to make use of that license, to make money with that license, and be successful with your real estate license. So the obvious benefit for us is your renewal requirements. You are required by the Florida Real Estate Commission to take post-licensing, continuing education courses every 2 years after you obtain your license. And we want to be the school you go to for those courses. But if you're not enjoying real estate and you're wanting to leave the real estate industry, we're not going to see you again. But more importantly, rather than just seeing you back from classes, we want to see you when you talk to your friends and family members that may be interested in starting a career in real estate. We want you to be telling your friends and family, hey, you got to go to the Tampa School of Real Estate. That's where I started my real estate career, and I'm glad I did. So that's what we want. We want an army of people out there waving the Tampa School of Real Estate flag that's advocates of the Tampa School of Real Estate. So that's why we do so much for our students. And I challenge you to find another school that cares this much about their students, that wants to see and put so much out there available, because we do this live stream every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern Time, to help you understand the technical side of the real estate industry. And we open this up for our past students, our current students, as well as our future students. You don't have to be on an enrollment list or anything like that for us. You could just tune in. There's plenty of real estate information to learn out there. There's plenty of real estate information that you could learn in your courses on top of this stuff here. But you could learn so much that is applicable to your business. And we also have State of Real Estate on Fridays to help you mastermind, to grow your real estate business, to do exactly that. Because we don't want you just to be an average agent, unless that's what you want. If that's what you want, then that's okay. Maybe you're just doing it part-time. That's okay as long as you're enjoying it. But if you want more, if you want to take your business to the top of the game, that's where we want to help you accomplish that in any way it is that we can. And the way we're here every week to help you do that, twice a week really to help you do that, is our weekly live streams. But let me get off my soapbox for a minute here, and let's get back into proration. So we just went and talked about the property tax proration. Now, if you did miss this, check out our Success Center. That's where we help you plan for your success, and you'll find all of the past episodes of Ask the Instructor, as well as this episode, will be posted on there immediately after we're done streaming here. So if you want to go back and rewatch any of this, watch it over and over again, there's a dial in there where you could select how fast it is. So I know sometimes I get a little fast when I'm talking here. You could slow me down, turn me down a little bit, and you could pause me if maybe you need to go through and do this calculation or whatever it may be, but absolutely check that out. It's tampaschool.com/success. But the next one we're going to talk about is a rental proration. So we're done with property taxes. We spend a majority of the time talking about property taxes because this is one you're going to see in almost every transaction. Need a new eraser here. So let's now talk about rental proration. So prorating rental income, prorating the money that the landlord receives on day one of the month. And we need to break this up, again, just like we did previously. But now we're not dealing with the entire year, we're dealing with 1 month, because rent is typically paid on a monthly basis. And rent is also typically paid at the beginning of the month. Let's pick June as our month of choice here. Remember, 30 days in June, 30 days have September, April, June, November, or the knuckle trick. in case you need to know how many days are in each particular month. And let's say that our day of closing is June 15th, right there in the middle of the month. And let's say the day of closing belongs to the buyer, meaning the buyer is entitled to rent for that June 15th day of closing. Now, in your head, this might seem pretty easy, but this question is designed to look easy, but have a little bit of a trick to it. And that trick is, so if we use our 360-day method, our broad estimation of what the proration may be, let's say our rent is, let's say $2,000. Let's say it's $2,000 for the month of June. And now we're doing a proration. Well, you might say, John, it's obviously $1,000. You're splitting the 30-day month right down the middle with 15, right? That seems like what it would be. 30 minus 15 is 15, so we take out 15 days. We've got 15 days left, right? So even 50-50 split, not quite. And that's why this question is designed to make you have to say, wait a minute, is that what it is? And yes, it is. And that's the benefit of going through and working through these, because you'll see that this isn't necessarily the middle of the month, especially when we have this day of closing going on the buyer side. Now, if we count out our days in the month, what if I told you that 30 minus 15 is not the math it is that you want to do here? The math it is that you're wanting to do is not even math. You're just counting the days. So if we count the days from the day of closing up until the end of the month, we've got 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So we've got 5 there. 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Wait a minute, that's 15 there. At 29, we have 30 days. So with our 30th day, this is really, on the buyer side, 16 days. How is that possible? Why is it 16 days and not 15? I thought 30 minus 15 was 15. 30 minus 15 is 15, but the math you're doing here isn't 30 minus 15. It's 30 minus 14. Because if we count the seller days leading up to the closing day, you'll see going up until June 15th is 14 days on the seller side. And now that makes a little bit more sense why we have 16 days over here, but yet only 14 days over on the seller side. But again, this question is designed, and I love this question because it tricked me the first time I got into it, but then I see it, I was like, that's why. That's why these details matter. And this one day might not seem like a whole lot, but we're going to do the math to find out exactly. Because you have roughly about half, a little bit more than half, basically, is how much of the rent the buyer's entitled to. But this is just so easy math. It's really not even that different from the 360-day method because we just have 30 days in the month of June. So we're going to take that $2,000 rent, and now we're going to divide it out by 30 days because that's what we're prorating it across. We're prorating it across this month. We're not prorating it across a year like we're doing with property taxes. Property taxes are an annual charge. This is a monthly charge. So we're going to take that $2,000 for our monthly rent for the month of June, divide it out by 30 days, and our daily rate is about $67 almost. It's 66.66667 and so on and so forth. It's really 6 repeating. So for this, again, you don't want to round. You want to save that. That's our daily rate. And now we're just going to multiply that by 16 days. And that's one of the differences between the rental proration and the property tax proration. With the rental proration, our number in question was 14 days. We actually, the seller side, that's what we were finding out for property tax prorations. With rental prorations, it's the buyer's days that we're concerned with because what's happening is rent is collected at the beginning of the month. Basically, every landlord collects rent up front. Rent is typically prepaid. And then what happens is if the seller has rent for the entire month of June, it's not that the seller gets to keep this whole $2,000. Oh, too bad, so sad, sorry buyer. You'll get rent in July, or in July in this case. No, the fair way to do this is to have a proration. But we don't care about the seller's days, we care about the buyer's days to say, okay, from this money, this $2,000 that was received up front, how much of this $2,000 do we have to credit to the buyer for the buyer's days? Now this is still going to show up, again, as a debit to the seller, because the seller's having to pay, and a credit to the buyer. Almost always, your prorations are going to end up being a debit to the seller and a credit to the buyer. About 9 times out of 10. The only times where that's not the case is if rent's paid, post-paid, paid at the end of the month, which I've never seen that existing, but I'm sure there's some landlord out there somewhere that lets you live somewhere or rent somewhere before they charge you rent. But anyways, and then the other situation where that's reversed is also if property taxes are already paid. So if they're already paid, then that would flip-flop. But most of the time, property taxes are going to be unpaid when you're within that current year. So again, that would be a debit to the seller and a credit to the buyer for the proration. Now, all we got to do is just go in our calculator and just go ahead and put in that 6.66666. Leave that in our calculator because you'll see that gets expanded even more. It's hiding some digits on us. We take that and multiply it by 16. And now at this point, we can round. We get $1,066.67. If we rounded early, we would have been off by a little bit, but overall pretty close. So by us doing the actual calculation rather than just estimating, okay, yeah, it's about half the rent, $1,000, we scored our buyer an extra $66.67 in rent, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but like I said, man, that's a moderate dinner out, not anything too extravagant, but they could celebrate their purchase now because you scored them an extra $66 in rental money. Really, the closing agent is the one, but hey, I've seen closing agents mess up some of these calculations before. Yes, they do use automated calculators, so it's always good to double check some of this stuff, whether you're the seller yourself or you're maybe just trying to catch something for your seller or for your buyer, so that way you can say, oh, wait a minute, this isn't right. We need to fix this before we do closing, because people do make mistakes. They're not doing it on purpose, but mistakes do happen. So it's good to understand how to do this math, just so in case your buyer or seller, your clients ask you about it, you could at least speak to why these numbers are what they are, or if they're asking you to actually do the calculation to double check it, you can do that. This isn't that hard. It's very simple math when you understand this concept. Again, I like doing these whole drawings up here. When I'm solving these, I usually don't do these drawings. Actually, I'm lying. I usually do. I do a little brief sketch of this here so I can get the idea, okay, well, this is what we're doing here, this. And it just helps you make sure you're not making a mistake. Yeah, you get to the point where you've done this enough. I could do one of these without having to draw this out, but I like drawing it out because I'm a visual person. This is something that you could draw out to your seller or your buyer and explain to them why this proration exists. Maybe you don't even have to do the math, and you just draw this out and say, okay, this is the time you're living in the property. This is the time the buyer's living in the property. For this one here, the rental proration, not really the buyer's living the property. The buyer would own the property here because this is an income-producing property. These are the days the buyer owns the property, those 16 days. It wouldn't be fair to the buyer for you to keep that whole $2,000. Look, I know you want that $2,000. I would want it too if I were in your shoes. But the way a typical ethical transaction goes down is that 16 days would go to the buyer in the form of a proration on the closing statement. So that's why the seller's going to have a charge, a debit for $10.66.67, and the buyer's going to receive a credit of $10.66.67 on the closing statement. So that's our prorations, at least for property taxes and rental income. Now, what we just did was a proration across a year and a proration across a month. That basically allows you to do almost any type of proration because we know now how to do it across a year and across a month. We know how to make a quick estimation that we could come up in a matter of seconds, especially if we have a calculator to help us out with the math. Or if we want to find the exact number, we could use the 365-day method and do that as well. So I hope this has helped you better understand prorations for property taxes and rental income. If you like today's episode and you want to learn more definitely check out our Success Center, tampaschool.com/success. There's a whole Ask the Instructor category. If you're looking to learn about technical stuff like this, Ask the Instructor is what you want to check out. If you're maybe looking to grow your real estate business, you want to maybe put this to use, you want to maybe go out there and find some clients where you could do math like this, then we've got a show for you as well. It's called State of Real Estate. We do it every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time. You could tune in this Friday at 12 noon, or you could go on our Success Center again, check out the State of Real Estate category, and go watch all of our previous episodes of State of Real Estate as well. I thank you guys for tuning in today. Again, if you have any questions, any way we can help you start your real estate career, get your real estate license, complete your post-licensing requirements, your continuing education requirements, or anything like that, any questions you have in general, give us a call. Our phone number is 813-928-0106. We have advisors standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way it is that they can. You can also check out our website for all kinds of information, not just the Success Center portion, although that's my favorite portion of our website, mainly because there's a lot of videos of me on there helping you guys learn stuff, but there's also a lot of great articles, there's calculators, so many tools in there that will really help you out. That's our Success Center. But you can find out more about the licensing process, sign up for our courses, all on our website, tampaschool.com. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I will see you on Friday for this week's episode of State of Real Estate.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com. Does your current career allow for unlimited income potential? With a career in real estate, the sky is the limit. What you put in is what you get out. Find out more about how you can tap into the unlimited income potential of a career in real estate at tampaschool.com.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.
You are watching
Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.